Good afternoon. Welcome to Best Practices Boot Camp. I am Glenn Stout, Vice President of Marketing and Sales for RynohLive, and I'll be your moderator for today's presentation. I want to thank you for joining us for the first in a series of webinars presented by Lender Secure. The U.S. military prepares recruits to be physically and mentally tough through a training program commonly referred to as boot camp. As most of you are all too aware, the landscape of our industry has dramatically changed, and operating our businesses has never been more challenging. So it is with this in mind that the solutions providers that comprise Lender Secure present to you Best Practices Boot Camp. Lender Secure launched in October of last year with the objective of assisting our industry with complying with ALTA's best practices. Lender Secure is a web portal that provides access to best-in-class solutions providers of some of the most critical components of best practices, securing your data, your documents, and your dollars. We work with title underwriters, independent title and settlement agents, attorneys, escrow agents, and notaries. Lender Secure currently consists of the following companies: Real Estate Data Shield, a leader in compliance education and e-courseware; DataMotion, a best-in-class provider of secure email solutions; Marble Security, a secure web browser and mobile management platform; and RynohLive, the undisputed leader in financial and escrow management security. The list of Lender Secure partners is growing and will soon include companies that also offer IT security assessment and certification, document destruction, background checks, cyber insurance, and more. Finally, I want to remind everyone that as an attendee of this webinar, you'll be receiving 6 Steps to Total Escrow Security, a white paper recently released by RynohLive, an article entitled The Timeline and Analysis of Lender Third-Party Service Provider Liability from Real Estate Data Shield, and a recording of today's webinar. Our lineup of speakers today are Christopher Galata, CEO of Real Estate Data Shield, Dick Reese, CEO and founder of RynohLive, and Bud Walder, Vice President of Marketing and DataMotion. Without anything further, please let us begin our program by introducing our first presenter, Christopher Galata. Chris is the CEO and founder of Real Estate Data Shield. He has represented institutional lenders in mortgage finance transactions for more than 20 years. He operates a successful law firm and launched Real Estate Data Shield 3 years ago. Chris regularly speaks nationally on information and data security and is a preferred vendor to leading national lenders and national underwriters. Let me now present to you Chris Galata. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Glenn, and welcome everyone. We're so happy to have all of you join us. Today we have representatives from title underwriters, independent title agents, escrow agents, and attorneys, and we're so happy to have such a large and diverse group, and we're so glad to see that the industry and people like yourselves are reaching out, looking to learn as much as you can about best practices and specifically security compliance, whether it's escrow fund security or data security. First thing I wanted to say was that I want you to think of data security as an ongoing journey and as something that you have to be mindful of and build into your daily routine and make a line item on your expense account and also develop as a core competency. Implementing basic safeguards helps us to reduce the chances of a security breach, but because it's also required by FTC regulations, Gramm-Leach-Bliley, lender mandates, it's an absolute necessity in the new age of lender scrutiny and increased compliance. And what we're going to do over the next 10 minutes or so is give you some background on the sources of compliance. That's the regulations and the legislation and the regulator bulletins that reference third-party liability specifically. And then we're going to give you some tips that you can incorporate immediately into your business. So non-public personal information, you've heard referred to as NPI, NPPI, also non-public personally identifiable information is what we're talking about here. And the math behind it is that NPPI is the last name coupled with the first name or first initial and the following types of information. Critical information like a social security number, a driver's license number, state-issued ID, or a credit card number. And I'm going to move quickly through these slides, but you'll have these handouts available as well. Where does this information reside in our offices? Well, both physically in our files and digitally on our network, the information finds itself in these common forms or documents. On the strictly settlement side, You'll see it in a uniform residential loan application, which contains the mother lode of personal identifiable information, borrower tax returns, lender engagement letters, driver's licenses, and the like. On common title documents, you'll see this again in identifications, title orders, payoff letters, escrow agreements, and the like. What are the background sources? Where did this all come from? Well, in the United States, it started in 1999 with Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which went effective in the summer of 2001. Among other things, Gramm-Leach-Bliley tasked the FTC with creating regulations that safeguard customer information. And they developed there's some background noise for our speakers. They developed the privacy rule in '99, the safeguards rule in '03, and the disposal rule in '05. More recently, we've all become aware of the CFPB April 2012 Service Provider Bulletin, which also reminded lenders that they're responsible for all these supply chain vendors that they use, settlement service providers. Then the Office of the Comptroller of Currency also has weighed in here. Back in 2001, they developed a bulletin on interagency guidelines establishing standards for safeguarding customer information. So we're looking 13 years back at these laws being effective, and our industry is only now starting to embrace it. So if you're wondering why lenders are feeling the urgency, it's because the OCC and the CFPB and the FTC are all telling our lender referral sources now, time to push down these requirements to your vendors as well. The Federal Reserve has also weighed in on this back in December of 2013 in their Managing Outsourcing Risk Bulletin. Alter, as you all know, developed their wonderful best practices in January 2013 that speaks specifically to what we should be doing as an industry to raise our compliance bar. You've got state agencies and regulators, and you've got lender mandates, and we're going to go through these quickly now. We talked about Gramm-Leach-Bliley went effective in 2001. And when they describe, and Gramm-Leach-Bliley talks about, among other things, privacy protections for consumers, when they talk about financial institutions, they don't think of it the way we as consumers do as banks, but they also include in the definition anyone engaging in financial activities or significantly engaged in financial activities, and clearly we're involved in that process as real estate settlement service providers. 1999, the FTC develops a privacy rule requiring a clear and conspicuous notice to both customers and consumers. 2002, 2003, the FTC comes out with their safeguards rule, which talks about the need for a written information security plan, employee training and management. And in 2005, they come out with their disposal rule, which talks about how we need to dispose of documents or digital media that contain non-public personal information. So the safeguards rule is worth a quick mention here. The safeguard rule has specific recommendations that companies should adhere to, mainly a written information security plan. They also talk about how the plan has to be appropriate to the size and complexity of the company and the nature and scope of activities. We deal in pretty sensitive information, so I think that highlights the importance for our industry to follow the safeguards rule. You have to designate employees to coordinate the information security plan, identify risks, design and implement a safeguards program, select service providers who themselves maintain safeguards, and evaluate and adjust the program in light of relevant circumstances. The other recommendations include employee management and training. Remember, if you haven't armed your front lines with an awareness of the laws and requirements and the best practices, you haven't really positioned your company to have any chance at compliance. They talk about regular and periodic risk assessments and monitoring, upgrading your security program. I recommend annually that you look, at least annually, that you look at everything you're doing and upgrade your systems. Require employees to read and sign company privacy policies, conduct background checks, and the like. They also recommend using strong passwords, screensavers, appropriate use for the internet policies for smartphones, tablets, email encryption, locking offices and file cabinets, regular training of staff, disciplinary measures for staff who don't follow security policies, and preventing, this is a big one, terminated employees from accessing networks and databases. You wonder if this has ever hit our industry. Well, to answer that question, it has. Back in 2004, a hacker got into Nation's Title's website and was able to breach their website and their network and get consumer non-public personal information. A television crew that came on site also found employees dumping documents containing non-public personal information into a dumpster. And the FTC pretty much threw the book at Nation's Title and required them to go through a whole series of remedial measures and outside monitoring. We talked about the April 2012 bulletin. This is where the CFPB told lenders that they expect them to monitor and take responsibility for their third-party vendors. And this kind of woke the lenders up to their responsibility for all us real estate settlement service providers. The OCC came out with their own third-party relationships bulletin that says pretty much the same thing but in a lot more detail. And they talk about lessons learned since their earlier third-party relationship bulletin, where they talk about an increased risk with the use of service providers. They also found that banks have generally failed to properly assess the risks associated with using third-party vendors, conduct due diligence, and enter into agreements and assess the third party's risk management capabilities. They also talk about a higher level of risk for critical activities which require higher bank oversight, and that includes settlements. So we're in a high-risk category according to the OCC. So now you've got the FTC, the OCC, and the CFPB all putting incredible pressure on lenders to be compliant and to push that compliance down to their third-party vendors, real estate settlement service providers. The third-party relationship bulletin specifically talks about information and physical security and safeguarding customer information. Federal Reserve, as we said, also has weighed in on this recently. So you see now another regulator weighing in on this. So again, if you're wondering why why lenders are so concerned, it's because every regulator they deal with is putting pressure on them to monitor and assess their third-party vendors. Alta's best practices, I'm sure you're all familiar with. 3, requires adoption and maintenance of a written policy of information security program. And I'm going to flip through quickly. Here's a few things that Alta looks for. You'll have this in your materials. This is a list of policies and procedures you should have. This is their assessment procedures. Wells Fargo, as you're aware, came out in March with a bulletin that let vendors know that they're expanding and enhancing third-party oversight. They tell us to prepare for top performer status. They acknowledge that there may be some transition time, but they ask, do you have a plan in place for adoption? And can you document and demonstrate inspection processes to validate your adoption of best practices? So now you've got the regulators putting pressure on the lenders to ensure that we're compliant as an industry, and you've got the lenders coming in and supporting Alta's efforts to do that as well. Employee training is a key recommendation. These are the first steps to compliance. Develop your policies and procedures, assess your risk, educate your staff, secure your workflows, ensure compliance with your sub-vendors, and implement the sound document destruction policy. I break down security into 3 categories: administrative, physical, and network security. For administrative, you should be training your staff. Again, they're your front lines. You should have your policies and procedures in place. For a small company, they don't have to be as robust as for a company of 500 employees, for example, but it has to be in writing. It has to be specific. Staff has to be trained in it and sign off on it. It can't be an email or a memo from 3 years ago. You have to give privacy notices, as we said, to both consumers and clients. I recommend to shred all policies so it's not left to employee discretion. You should have vendor non-disclosure agreements with your related vendors, accountants, IT people, independent contractors. You should do background checks on your employees and your independent contractors. You should go beyond the clean desk and have a clean office and clean screen policy. Screensavers that time out, and an office that's free and clear of all documents containing NPPI. And you should be aware of all the authorized devices like tablets and smartphones that contain have access to the network. And I'm going to click through the rest of the administrative ones, but you'll have access. It's exactly what we just discussed, but in more detail. And we're going to get to the next category. Bear with me. Physical security critical controls. Make sure your doorways are secure and have a sign-in log, have a clean desk and a clean office policy. File cabinets should be locked at night. Desks should be cleared. Consider using security cameras, privacy screens, have locked offices, especially for management and especially for your server. I recommend, again, shredding all paper and digital media. So, for example, your network copier at the end of the lease, that should be, a technician should remove that disk that everything's been copied onto. And also your IT people should have that swept every day so that that hard disk on that network copier is wiped every day. And you should have locks on computers, especially laptops. And lastly, for network security critical controls, work with your IT people. Let them know that this is their job now. They have to set up a password protection system that every 90 days new passwords have to be put into place, and they have to be strong, 9 at a minimum, 9 characters, letters. You should have computer screen timeout after 60 seconds. So if someone leaves their desk, their screen times out. You should have port lockdown. Your USB ports are particularly vulnerable to a virus that can come in through the back door. So unless someone actually needs to access the USB port, I consider locking it down. We talked about network printers and scanners and having them wiped daily. You should have restrictive access to programs so that only people that need to access certain levels actually do have access. Updates and patches to all software should be updated immediately, and there should be a system in place for that. And finally, and our friends from DataMotion are going to talk about this, you should have a robust encryption program that ensures that everything you're sending out is encrypted. This is just a visual of what a network architecture might look like. This is our executive team, Professor Paul Schwartz from Berkeley Law School and Richard Purcell, Microsoft's first privacy officer, part of our executive team. And I want to thank you very much. Here's our webinar disclaimer, our marketing person, and I'm passing off now.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much, Chris. Our next presenter is Dick Reese, CEO and founder of RynohLive. After retiring from the Navy, Dick founded Reliant Title in 1998. His vision and passion for continuous improvement, process control, and systems integration was the catalyst for the development of Rhino. Introduced nationally in 2009, RynohLive has become synonymous with escrow security and fraud prevention. Now let me introduce to you Dick Reese. Take it away, Dick.
Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody today, and overwhelmed by the attendance. And Chris is a real hard act to follow. He really hits it on the nail, and I would like to be able to continue that level of excellence. When I started in this industry, quite frankly, I really didn't even understand escrow accounting, and I'm actually holding the escrow accounting standards books that I was handed by my underwriter back in '98, and it consisted in the escrow accounting standards of all of 5 pages. So, you know, where are we today? And I think we've come a long way. And you see the date of September 2014 in front of you. This year has been designated as a year of compliance implementation, and many of you, I'm sure, are well on the way and on the path of reaching, certification that you meet the ALTA best practices. The interesting part is the lenders are also wrestling with what it is they're going to be requiring of the title companies and title agencies and law firms that they do business with. And I'm sure that many of you in the audience today have already received these compliance letters. They're already going out asking title agencies what they're doing. In fact, there have actually been title agencies today, right now as we speak, that have lost the ability to do business with some of the major lenders because they have not been moving forward with any sense of urgency towards being compliant with all of the regulatory requirements, the lender's requirements, or ALTA's best practices. And what I'd like to do today is just walk you through about really understanding, first of all, what ALTA escrow best practices entail, and the term in there that is key is the allowing for the electronic verification of your reconciliation. It's not just a matter of handing the reconciliation along with the bank statement. It's really being able to dig down into the information and make sure that the data supports what's been documented. You also have to be able to now reconcile the accounts on a daily rather than a monthly basis. And I can remember back when I was really just happy when I got it done by the 15th of the following month. Additionally, the ability to demonstrate why you're holding the money. And so not only if you have money on a file, what is the documentation to support the purposes of holding that money? And as I said, electronic verification system is looking actually at the data that's being held by your bank and your bank's database of all the transactions. And in your accounting system is being able to look and square up the data in the bank and the data in your settlement software, so that you can't, as you work, cook the books, doctor the bank recs or your settlement statements. Daily reconciliation is really at the heart of things, and when I first started looking at this from a personal standpoint, we have an obligation to make sure that money gets where it goes in a timely manner. And reconciliation is really more than just balancing three numbers. There's far more into it. It's of course the bank and the book balance and the trial balance, and I'm sure you all know what they are. But it's making sure all the other things, the pending deposits, the negative file balances, the files with funds, money that's gone through the bank account but has not gone through your settlement software. And the other big thing from a reconciliation on a daily basis is that the fact of the matter is that the business banking rules are markedly different than your own personal banking rules. So in other words, when you get your bank statement at home, you've got until a few days after that to do the reconciliation or balance your checkbook, as it were. Well, in the business world, and if you're using online banking, which you all should, you're basically getting a bank statement every day, and there's a 24-hour time limit on that you really have to be paying attention to what's gone through your bank. And back in the old days, people gave you more time than there is available today to notify them if something gets incorrectly posted to your account or a fraudulent item is presented for payment. And I won't get into the things or the UCC regulations about exercising ordinary care and best practices. You're responsible for what's posted to your account, and you have an obligation to get back to the bank within 24 hours. Written procedures. It's more than just 5 pages. And when you start looking at what it is that you need to have documented in your escrow account management, it's everything. I've broken it down by pre-closing, post-closing, and then software controls. But file balance. Is the money there? Is it in the bank? Is it available for disbursement? And it doesn't matter whether you're in your wet settlement state. Wet settlement act says you got to have the money before you go to the table. Dry settlement says you can close, but you don't have to have the money in hand, but you have to have it before you disperse. And do you have the procedures in place if you happen to be in a situation where the money is not there and available at the closing table? Check endorsement. What are your policies and procedures on what type of checks you'll take from individuals and up to how much balance, and how do you endorse the checks that you presented? And then there's this whole issue of good funds versus collected funds, and I'll get into that in greater detail. This is one of the most confusing aspects of the whole escrow account management, and I think the good funds legislation that's out there in many cases don't serve us well. Then you get into the use of depositing funds into your escrow account, particularly if you're holding a remote deposit capture machine where you can drop a check in the scanner and it goes into the bank, and The question is the bank funds, are they really on deposit, and can you disperse them? And I'd like to talk about personal things and experiences that I have. And I go back several years ago when we had a Virginia account and a North Carolina account, and we were doing closings. It was the last day of the month, and we received the wire, and it went to the Virginia account for a North Carolina closing. Well, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we realized the problem with the money went into the Virginia account rather than the North Carolina account. We were very busy, and we called the bank and asked the teller, or the bank officer actually, to transfer the money from the Virginia account into the North Carolina account, and we proceeded to disperse the funds. Well, the next day when we got our end of the month bank statement, the money wasn't there. In fact, therefore, it showed as a negative balance. We got dinged on our annual audit because when we got back to the bank, they said, well, if you'd done this online, you'd have had immediate availability of the funds, but because you called into the branch and it was after 2 o'clock, you didn't have availability to the funds until the following day, and so it was considered a RESPA violation. And so the question is, you have to really make sure that the money is in the account before you disperse the funds, whether it be a check, and even if the check isn't going to clear for a couple of days, it has to physically be there. The whole issue of dealing with IRS liens and making sure that the money that the IRS is calling for is the actual dollar amount that they're going to be requiring, and sometimes it may require you to consult with your underwriter, because not in all cases will the IRS be satisfied with you give them the money they've called for, and do you have a power of attorney to be able to talk to the IRS if there are some problems down the line. Then you get into these procedures for PACER searches. Are you doing a PACER search before the closing to make sure that there are no other liens or judgments that can be applied? And then the whole FIRPTA, the foreign investor in real estate, and those procedures, which are very complex, but you have to be addressing those in your procedures, because in FIRPTA, in some instances, you're going to have to withhold 10% of the proceeds, and what are you going to do with them if you haven't dispersed them? And so that gets very complicated. And then post-closing, how many of you on the backside are doing another PACER search? We update title to make sure that nothing has happened in the gap. Well, we've actually had clients who have filed for bankruptcy between the time we did the initial search until we did the closing, and now you give them affidavits and they'll sign anything. They're not me affidavits. So we actually always make sure that before we disperse, we run another PACER search, and we have a copy, and it's documented, it's in the file. And then getting into the whole procedures of, signing the checks and sending out the wires, and when you go to the table, is there a ledger card that shows that the money is in the account and then your files are balanced, and does the processor closer sign that? And then when you go to sign the checks and you have the file balance card and the ledger card and the HUD, are they all the same as the actual check or the wire that you're sending out? And the whole question about payees, not changing the names. Then there's the whole issue of who's authorized to sign checks and who's authorized to sign and initiate and approve wires, and how are you keeping that up with the bank, making sure that the signature cards are being sent to the bank, and when an employee leaves, are you filling out new signature cards, and are you going into the online banking and removing the authorizations and privileges? All of these things, and not only do you have to be doing these, but you have to have the training records, you have to have the lesson plans to show that you're addressing these matters, and then you have to have the records to support that you've in fact done that. The simple thing like a reissue of a check, are you requiring another ledger card? Are you getting the HUDs changed? All of these things have to be in those written procedures, and then the whole question of stop payment and how do you do it, how do you authorize it, and how do you follow up in 6 months? Because there's some rules that, stop payment's only good for 6 months. The other piece is there are still lots of people out there that don't use what I call industry standard settlement software. They use QuickBooks or something else that doesn't give you the ability to control who has access to create a file, print a check, void a check, delete a transaction, transfer money between files, and then are you freezing the files after settlement so that nobody can come back in after the fact and change a check that may still be out there, stale dated, and and then nobody can move the money to another file without certain controls? Are you requiring that your closers have, and those that have access to your software, your settlement software, have a different login password than from your login to your individual computers? And I'm going to talk a little bit and show some specific examples of how this is so important. And then the following stuff is, what are you doing about the money that never got to the right place? Written procedures about your unclaimed property, stale dated checks and the check follow-ups. Some states require you to be writing a letter after 30 days. Do you have pre-populated letters that all you have to do is fill in the blanks for the different types of cases? In some states, you have to send out a letter with 120 days before you escheat the funds. Then you have the funds that you've never dispersed, whether it's taxes that are coming due or interpolating funds, escheating funds. All those things are very important. And then just like with escrow, what you need to do a threat assessment. What are the greatest risks to handling your money, and what are the greatest threats internally? I mean, you can have all the written procedures in the world, you can have all the training in the world, but are you verifying and validating that it's really happening? Because when I say in the Navy, you have to expect what you inspect. Are you making sure that everything is being done? Are the prelims being sent by secure email? And just remember that title employees and closers don't go postal, they go escrow. Positive pay, number one defense against check fraud. You absolutely have to have it. And you have got the payee match or a non-payee match. The payee match version keeps people from changing the payee lines on a check. So positive pay with payee match is absolutely critical. You have to have the ability to make sure that you're following up, that the payoffs are getting where they're going, the recordings are actually being recorded, and the checks are being cleared. The last thing in the world you ever want to do is pay for a homeowner's insurance policy or a home buyer's warranty and then find out the check didn't get there, and then have the house catch fire, and you then have the owner's responsibility having to pay for a house. I had the situation where we did a home buyer's warranty. The check didn't get cleared and we didn't know about it. And this was many, many years ago, so we wound up being the home buyer's warranties company. And so you just really need to have systems in place that follow up in an orderly manner to make sure that the checks get negotiated. The big piece, and one of the things that you can do is take a look at your good funds legislation in the state, because good funds are not collected funds. Collected funds are funds that are irrevocably credited. They're talked about in the Federal Reserve Banking Regulations CC. Just because the bank has made the funds available to you doesn't mean they can take them back away. There are several states out there now that have passed legislation limiting how much money you can take as good funds, and the question then becomes how much money you're willing to lose. I think with the new Responsability and the 3-day rule, it gives you plenty of time to get your clients to send you a wire rather than a cashier's check. Escrow security, and again, it's just using the administrative controls in your settlement software, segregation of duties, daily reconciliation, strong passwords, and dual authentication when you're sending your wires. Cybersecurity, I won't go into many more details, but it's, again, all of those things that Chris talked about. They're all interrelated. There's a new attack recently. We had a client who was on Rhino that the malware came into their computers, and rather than wiring the money out of the company, went into their settlement software and started creating fictitious files, transferring funds from one account to another, posting fraudulent checks that were going to be printed outside the office, and the only thing that prevented them and saved them was the fact that they were getting morning reports, they were reconciling daily, they were looking at their reports. The initial hack was for about $350,000, but there was well over $2 million in the account. Now, the other sidebar of that is the malware got in there, and there were well over 10,000 settlement files with all of that stuff Chris was talking about, and you get into all this FTC reporting requirements when you get in there. But when I looked at the software, there were no segregation of duties, there was no separate passwords. The malware was able to get into one computer, create files, transfer funds, void checks, move money, rather than compartmentalizing all of that information. Online banking, bottom line, dual controls, standalone computer dedicated strictly for handling your online banking. It's not part of your network. There's no other software on it. You need malware protection, strong controls, and I recommend that you use a product like Marble or Trusteer to encrypt your interactions between your computer and your bank so the malware cannot get in there. Take another look at your web browsers. There was just a recent huge furor over the compromise in Internet Explorer. I personally don't recommend that you use IE because it's the most vulnerable to malware because it's the most predominant in the industry. I prefer to use either Chrome or Firefox, but then you get into the problems with ActiveX, which you need to print your closing packages. So there are a lot of things that you need to do to lock down your computers that are all tied into protecting your money. Encrypted email, and when I was out speaking, and you're saying, why is he talking about encrypted email also? It's because you're sending prelims to your lenders, and it's probably the quickest and easiest thing you can get taken care of. In fact, if you start today, I promise you within 3 to 4 days you can be up and running. You can get all your people on secure email, and it's not all that much expensive. It's less than $100 a month, unless you're a very large company. And why is this important? This is a couple of pictures of that I took when I was captain of a minesweeper, 38 years ago. And I met with Norwood Gay, who is a former senior underwriting counsel for the fund down in Florida, and we were at the Business Strategies Conference, and being a couple of old wooden hulls ship sailors, we started talking about our old Navy days, and I was telling him about my sister ship catching fire and having to go alongside. Well, why am I telling you this story is because I went up into my attic after talking to Norwood and opened up an old sea chest, and I had a whole stack of pictures from the investigation. I scanned them and emailed them to him. 5 days later, they were on the internet. And I went, in fact, when I saw them, I was doing looking at one of these shipmate websites. I went, oh my God. I called Norwood and I said, what are you doing? Who'd you send that to? And he said, nobody. Who's reading your email? We've gotten a lot of these. Maybe some of you have seen them recently. You've gotten these emails that have a HUD, say, we'd like you to approve the HUD, but there's no address line, and when you click on it, it takes you to a phishing website. So really, in a nutshell, there's nothing to be learned from the second kick of a mule. There's so many things to be learned. things are changing on a day-to-day basis, and really now is the time to get started or really focus on getting all of these things documented in place. And thanks again, and I appreciate again the opportunity to talk with you all.
Thanks, Dick. Our final presenter today is Bud Walder, Vice President of Marketing for DataMotion. Bud leads the marketing team at DataMotion, and they're a leader in email encryption and secure file transfer solutions and have been for over 15 years. Bud's been active in the communications technology industry for over 30 years, including product management roles at Intel Corporation and product marketing leadership at Dialogic Corporation. I'll now turn over the program to Bud. Thanks, Bud.
Thanks, Glenn, and thanks, everyone, for joining today. In this final segment, I'm going to focus on document security, specifically the documents and data which contain NPPI that are sent and received by your organization via email communications. So the need to comply with ALTA best practices, as Chris pointed out earlier, direct result of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau's increasing concern for consumers during the real estate settlement process. So pillar number 3 specifies the use of secure delivery methods when transmitting NPPI, non-public personal information, like the examples listed here and as you saw previously. Transmitting this data securely is becoming really a core requirement that the lenders want to see from their business associates. You don't want to find yourself as the source of a data leak that incurs non-compliance fines for you or the lender. They can be pretty big and painful. And of course, you don't want to be the cause of actual financial loss through fraud or identity theft for your consumer. Good news is it's fairly easy to implement, secure solutions, encrypted email and file transfer solutions to address this. There's typically 2 solutions out there, and they're complementary for secure electronic delivery. A selective email encryption, which, as you'd expect, is user-selected and used on an as-needed basis from your email client when you want to send NPPI securely. And the second is an automatic email encryption, which is done by a policy-based email encryption gateway that works with your email server and basically scans all your email traffic for NPPI and then addresses it accordingly. So we'll go into a little bit of detail on both, but first I'll talk a little bit more about why email encryption is necessary. So as Glenn just pointed out with his pictures there of the battleships, unencrypted email content is truly visible. Once you create an email and you hit send, normal email transmission, and it leaves your email server, it travels through many public servers on internet hops. That's basically the way the internet works, right? It goes from server to server before it reaches your recipient, and that's where the security issue is. At any one of those public server hops, the content you're sending is really viewable and available for misuse, and even without your knowledge, even if it arrives at its destination, untouched, so to speak. So we often use this postcard analogy for unencrypted email. Sending a normal email is kind of like sending private information on the back of a postcard through the Postal Service. Anyone along that delivery path, anybody that picks up that card can read the content. It's not hidden in any way. And with email, it's somewhat worse, or maybe easier to see, or by more people actually, because a hacker can tap in to a public server from anywhere along an email delivery route from any of those public servers, and see that NPPI, steal that NPPI or other sensitive financial data. So case in point, you may have seen this headline, an article published on ALTA's website they're warning title agents of a new email fraud where hackers are targeting consumers and stealing or attempting to steal earnest money from upcoming transactions. And they're doing it just as I pointed out. This is done by kind of hijacking emails as they're traveling through these public servers and finding ones that have information about pending transactions from a title agency. In this case, taking them and then sending a fake email to the borrower that appears to be from the title agency, kind of a phishing attempt, and they try to provide fake wire information and trick the borrower to sending the money to them. So it's this type of attack that illustrates the importance of using an encrypted email to send that private information and account number information. It's an easy way to foil this type of threat, and it's this type of thing, obviously, that drives the need for compliance regulations in the first place, and things like best practices in order to avoid this type of risk to your organization and to your customers. So, going back to the options to protect your email and attachments, secure mail or encrypted email desktop, this is that selected or selective email encryption type service. And this is very popular, very easy to implement, and very, very cost-effective way to address it, to get your emails encrypted. It's real powerful, has great encryption properties, yet it's easy for your users to use. It's an easy email encryption solution, and it secures any sensitive email and file attachments from that exposure or theft, which then ensures the compliance with the ALTA best practices. Our particular product in this case has a special Send Secure button that goes into your Outlook email client. It's a simple plugin, and that makes sending that encrypted email really simple, just a one-button process. You click that to send, and it automatically encrypts the message. But probably, more importantly than that, it also features this patented auto-provisioning or setup of a recipient mailbox, the person that you're sending to, where the encrypted message is delivered, and it makes it really easy for the people that you're sending to retrieve those secure messages and those secure files. So, if it's easy for your users to use and for your recipients to receive and actually send back to you, then it becomes, much easier to be in compliance with best practices overall. A complementary solution to that is the automated solution. It's a secure mail gateway function. So this is kind of an extra layer of security, and this provides an automatic, what we call policy-based email and file encryption solution that safeguards MPPI in email messages and file attachments by scanning everything that you send, all your outbound email and attachments. So it has this policy, and it looks for MPPI. If it finds it, it can then route those messages to the cloud service, a secure mail or encrypted message cloud service for encryption before delivering the message. If it doesn't find any, the email goes out just normally. And this is typically done with a server software that's installed on your premise and works right in conjunction with your email server, and it complements that cloud service, that service that is a user-selected desktop service. So again, it's kind of extra security to catch MPPI if your users forget to use a Send Secure button when they're sending something. So one of the very important things about email encryption these days is that you're not always sending desktop to desktop. People want to send and more often receive on mobile devices. And one of the great things about this particular email encryption solution is that it has great universal access for mobile devices, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet. really regardless of the operating system, whether it's an iOS or Android or Windows device. And that's because there's no application required. Basically, you just sign into a web portal which is optimized for both viewing and also for navigating the document or creating or sending a document. So it's really easy to send or receive secure mail, encrypted mail messages from a mobile device this way. And not only for the subscriber, not only for you, but it's also really easy for recipients to receive and view secure mail on mobile devices like this as well. So I'll wrap up my segment by just saying when it comes to securing data and meeting ALTA secure best practices around your data in motion or your data and documents in emails, this kind of email encryption really delivers. It's very easy to use. You can kind of see what one of our title insurance customers quotes here. And Dick mentioned it too. It's very easy to set up, very quick to put in place, easy for you to use, and easy for your customers to use. And this, I reference Outlook as a very common plugin, but it also works with the cloud services now, like Office 365 from Microsoft and Google Apps, subscription services as well. If you're using those cloud services, this is fully compatible with them. Mobile experience is great, no app required, and you have a choice. You can go with just a selective service, or you can add that extra automated gateway function, which gives you an extra layer of compliance and security. Cost effective, and really our team handles lion's share deployment to get you up and running. So that kind of minimizes a lot of IT support requirements. So that, in a nutshell, as you see, a simple way to be in compliance with your data and documents that are sent to your business associates and consumers over email. So with that, I'll hand it back to Glenn, and we'll take a look at some of the costs involved with doing this.
That's great. Thanks, Bud. That does conclude the presentation for the day, but we do have some time for some questions. And I have a slide here that I'm going to leave up just as a placeholder for any of you out there who are interested in the providers, the solution providers that you've heard speak today. There's a cost analysis, or at least a placeholder, like I said, for costs if you're interested. We do have some time for some questions, and let me get to those right away. I have one here for Chris Galata over at Real Estate Data Shield. Chris, the first question is, how long does the coursework take to complete?
We worked with e-learning experts and determined that 20 minutes to 25 minutes is the optimal learning time. So we came up with a courseware that takes 20 minutes, and it incorporates the laws, rules, and regulations and best practices into the workday of a title or settlement or escrow agent, so that staff would be able to absorb it. So it takes 20 minutes, and then there's an exam at the end. If you pass it, you can print out a certificate of completion and demonstrate your compliance.
Great. Dick, this one is for you. It comes in from Patrick. He said, we're in a rural area. Our bank is not set up for online banking. A daily reconciliation is not practical and probably will not be available for the next couple of years. Is this something that will stop us from being able to conduct business? Dick, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just trying to collect myself.
Oh, okay.
Online banking, daily reconciliation. That's a hard one to ask. I mean, one of the things, I always say, selecting where you bank. I mean, I was not literally unaware that there were still banks out there that did not provide online banking. The question is then the choice of where you bank, and that's sometimes you need to go to the bank that provides you the proper protection and security of your funds, and your banks too have to have certain levels of compliance, and they talk about FFIEC compliance, and how are they protecting your data, and does the bank that you're banking with offer a positive pay solution? Does it provide you a secure environment to do your wiring? Of course, you know, you can still go to the bank and manually send a wire and present them that way. You know, it's about options and relationships, but at the end of the day, there is a necessity to protect your business and your ability to do business. And you don't necessarily have to bank with a bank that's local. I mean, right now in an electronic banking environment, it's completely possible to even bank with somebody that's out of state or in the next county. It doesn't necessarily have to be the bank right there in your own community because of the things called, you know, remote deposit capture devices where you don't even have to go into the bank. So that's a tough one, and that's something I would consult with your lenders and underwriters, and before I would just make a precipitous change.
But I have a question for you. This comes in from Ellen, and she says, what do you do with lenders, big ones like Quicken Loans, that do not accept an encrypted email?
We haven't seen a lot of pushback on that. I mean, one of the things that we do with our email messages is that they're completely optimized so that they don't get trapped in spam filters, and ours aren't. Some of the email solutions out there require public and private keys and separate emails, and they can be pretty complex for the recipient. Our approach is different. It's a lot simpler. Again, the emails are typically, go to the recipient. It's a notification email that goes to the recipient and says, "Hey, you've got a secure mail message waiting for you," and they go to the link, and it automatically opens a portal. They have a mailbox that's pre-set up for them. They just set their own. All they have to do essentially to pick up the mail is put their own or create their own password, and then they've got a recipient mailbox. They can read the mail. They can look at the attachments, download the attachments. They can reply. They can reply with attachments. And in essence, they become an encrypted mail user themselves. So it's pretty rare that we get a complaint that, hey, my recipients can't receive the email. In essence, the email comes to them. The notification email comes to them like any other simple email, and it comes from the sender's address. So it's not coming from some strange address that would trigger some blocking pattern from the corporation or the bank's own kind of firewalls. So we haven't really encountered that, and I think that's encountered sometimes with more kind of complex and key-driven solutions that are on the market. Okay.
I have a question here from Adam, and I'm going to open it up to the group. I think it's more of a general question. So how robust must these controls be for a solo practitioner with no employees?
So Chris Galata here. I'll take a first shot at that. Every consumer out there has the right to have their non-public personal information be protected. And if the vendor that a bank uses happens to be a small vendor, a solo practitioner, or a large company, that consumer's protections and the safeguarding of their information shouldn't really vary. So there's an argument out there that you still have to have some basic protections that you offer up and that you demonstrate to lenders as well as regulators that you have in place. So you still need to have all the protections of your network. You still need to shred and destroy documents. You still need to and data. You still need to give privacy notices to consumers and clients, and you still need to safeguard customer information and have written information security policies and procedures. The good news is, because you're a sole practitioner, once you've done that, you're pretty much good to go, and you don't need to do the retraining of staff as you onboard. You don't need to expand the systems that you have because you're increasing the size of your staff or the number of your offices. But you still need to have information security policies and procedures. You still need to give privacy notices, and you still need to dispose of non-public personal information. And always answer that question when you're asking it with, look at it from the consumer side. Should they be any less protected because the bank chose to work with a sole practitioner or a 500-person company?
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else? Well, we're at our time limit here at 3 o'clock, a little after, and I want to conclude our presentation today. We look forward to seeing you all in the next boot camp series, which should be sometime this summer. For those, we had a couple questions come in about the materials today. Those materials will be available on the Lender Secure website, which can be found at http://lendersecure.com, and there's a section there we've just opened up called Resources. By the end of day today, the PowerPoint will be loaded up there and some of the other materials we spoke about. If you have specific questions and you want them answered, I'd be more than happy to give you my email address. It's glenn.stout, glen.stout@Rynoh, and that's spelled RYNOH.com. I will reach out to you individually. Thanks, everyone, and that concludes our presentation.